The next two papers lay the foundation for archaeological studies that include soul-like essences in trying to understand the motivations of past peoples. The papers survey and systematize post-contact woodland and plains Indians' notions of soul-like essences. The first of the pair of papers is by Mary Kupsch, M.A., a folklore specialist who hails to the University of Oregon. Her presentation is entitled Soul Concepts of Postcolonial Woodland and Plains Indians 1, a systematic survey of specific ideas in oral narratives as a foundation for an archaeology of souls. Her paper will be read by Brianna Rafidi.
Archaeologists often complain that reconstructing the religious knowledge of a past people is hard. They also complain that such reconstructions seem empirically ill-grounded or are unconvincing because other interpretations appear equally plausible. There are a variety of reasons for this malaise. First, archaeologists are trained as social scientists and generally lack formal education in the field of religious studies. Second, archaeologists dig and study material culture. In general, we are a lot inclined toward and at ease with the material, and much less so with insubstantial cultural ideas, religious or otherwise. Third, some past peoples were not very expressive materially of their religious notions, making the reconstruction of their religious ideas difficult at best. Think of good gray late woodland societies versus flamboyant Hopewellian societies. Finally, religious ideas are symbolic. Material symbols by nature, A, involve semi-free relationships between form and meaning, B, are typically multivocal with multiple levels of meaning, C, are open to reinterpretation, and D, may be interpreted by different segments of a community in different ways, creating a palimpsest of ideas. Malinowski pointed out some of the distinct kinds of religious ideas within a community: institutionalized dogmas embedded in myth and custom, orthodox explanations of religious specialists, popular public opinion, and individual speculation. For the eastern woodlands and plains, there is an additional, very substantial reason for the unease archaeologists have with reconstructions of past religions. Historic woodland and plains analogues of prehistoric religious systems have not been systematized by ethnologists or others for either their area-wide general tenets or local variations for most essential topics. Examples include maps of the cosmos, afterlives, their numbers, locations, and natures, souls, their number and functions, relationships between the deceased and the living, non-human spiritual beings, spiritual aspects of medical knowledge, gender and age distinctions in metaphysical aspects of the self, notions of community, relationships with nature, etc. Three notable exceptions are Aki Holkranz's compilations and analyses of soul concepts and Orpheus myths among North American Indians, and Irving Hollowell's study of religious ideas and rites concerning bears in circumpolar regions. Lacking a systematized comparative knowledge base on most religious topics for historic groups, insight into prehistoric religious matters is limited. Nor can archaeological reconstructions be scientifically evaluated for their likelihood relative to the spectrum and frequencies of historic concepts. Instead, unsystematized knowledge of historic religions encourages cherry-picking historic analogues that the archaeologist happens to know or comes across. Today, we report our efforts to help overcome the knowledge problem. We systematize one large area of historic woodland Indian thought with eyes toward application to prehistoric woodland societies, concepts about souls. The impetus for this work comes partly from Aki Holkranz's survey 60 years ago on the numbers of souls that North American Indians thought humans to have, and partly from Robert Hall's observation 40 years ago that some woodland Indians knew the human being to have multiple souls located at places where the pulse is felt and at joints. Impetus also derives from some Ohio Hopewell burials that seem to depict the journey of souls of the deceased to an afterlife. An example is this mica effigy human body emerging from the skull of the deceased. Might this depict a soul emerging from the body at death? For a frame of reference and to assess the reasonableness of this interpretation, it would be helpful to know where in the body historic woodland Indians thought souls to reside, where they thought souls to exit upon death, how many souls were thought to exit, what souls were said to look like. We surveyed literature for concepts of souls held by 43 woodland tribes and plains tribes originally from the woodlands. These tribes encompass 9 language families and isolates. Here is the geographic distribution of the tribes. Among the more encompassing ethnohistorical source materials we surveyed are the Bureau of American Ethnology's annual reports and bulletins, Adair's History of the American Indians, Schoolcraft's Archives of Aboriginal Knowledge, Blair's Indian Tribes of the Upper Mississippi and Great Lakes, the Jesuit Relations, the Human Relations Area Files, and references in the extensive bibliographies of religious studies researcher Aki Holkrantz. Our search focused on 9 research topics, 5 of which we report now in this paper by Mary Kupsch, and 4 of which Brianna Rafidi's paper will discuss. The topics include native concepts about the number of souls that reside in the human body, the locations of those souls in the body, the number of souls that leave the body during life when sleeping and in other altered states of consciousness, and during death, the locations of exit of souls from the body in life and in death, when souls leave the body in life and in death, the qualities and capabilities of souls while an individual is alive and after death, and the functions and activities of souls when they are in the body and after they leave the body. For the 9 topics, we found and analyzed a total of 632 cases recorded from 216 independent references. Cases were limited to those by a native informant or a direct outside observer. For each case, information on each of the 9 topics was parsed out and recorded in its own separate database. Original text was retained in the databases. Summarizing variable states that describe this information were defined using textual words to the extent possible, to minimize our laying our own interpretations on the source materials while organizing them. A total of 186 different variable states or native concepts were found for the 9 topics. These ideas were studied for their relative frequencies and their geographic distributions across 3 regions: the Northeastern Woodlands, the Southeastern Woodlands, and the Plains. Some of our major findings for the first 5 topics are as follows. Concepts of souls held by historic woodland and plains Native Americans were considerably diverse, varying among the Northeastern Woodlands, Southeastern Woodlands, and Plains. It would be a mistake to think that one could confidently apply analogies from any one of these areas to archaeological remains in another of these areas for most topics. By far, the most common numbers of souls thought to reside in an individual are 2 and 1. These ideas are reported with equal popularity and in all 3 regions frequently. When 2 souls were recognized, they were often named differently. The notion of 4 souls was restricted to a small number of close tribes on the northern and central plains, plus the southeastern Yuchi and Cherokee. 3 souls were reported by only the Delaware. Our data do not support Holkrantz's generalization that North American Indians usually recognize 2 souls: a free soul capable of leaving the body during life and journeying to an afterlife upon death, and 1 or more body souls that remain with the body in life and death. Intratribal diversity was frequent. Almost every tribe with more than 1 case had more than 1 variant. This pattern is asymmetric. All tribes that reported 2 souls also reported 1 soul, whereas only half of the tribes that reported 1 soul also reported 2. Souls were thought to be located most often in the heart, the head, the hair, scalp, and nape of the neck, and the bones, all with similar frequency. The idea of a heart soul was restricted to the northeastern and southeastern woodlands, while the 2 notions of a soul in the head and a soul in the bones were known to tribes of only the northeast. Significantly, this area was also unique in having told of a person who removes the brains of a deceased individual's soul on its journey to an afterlife. The hair, scalp, and nape of the neck were reported by mainly Northern Plains tribes. Other seats of souls mentioned rarely include the breath, blood, shadow, and throughout the body. When a soul was thought to be localized, only parts of the axial body were mentioned, not limbs, hands or feet, or fingers or toes, which significantly are all objects of trophy taking. When two souls were recognized, pairings included the head and heart, the head and bones, and the heart and blood. Almost all tribes were internally consistent in their views about where souls were located in the body. The number of souls reported to leave the body in life or death is primarily one. This idea was widespread across all three regions. The ideas that 2 souls and 4 souls exited the body did occur, but in only 8 tribes and 3 tribes respectively. 2 exiting souls were known to mainly northeastern tribes, and 4 exiting souls by mainly plains tribes. Whenever multiple souls are mentioned as leaving the body, the circumstance is always death rather than the life activities of dreaming, trancing, and visioning. No cases were found of all of an individual's souls remaining in the body at death, and none leaving. Tribes that had multiple, diverse ideas about the number of souls that leave the body were common. Half of all reporting tribes mentioned multiple variants. Souls were known to leave the body through the head, face, breath, heart, and anus. Data are sparse. Places of residence of souls and places of their exit from the body did not fully correlate. The anus was thought a place of exit, but never the seat of a soul. The nape of the neck, bones, blood, and body at large were known as seats of souls, but never places from where souls departed. Known locations of soul departure may have been based on natural changes to the body at death: the cessation of breathing and the heartbeat, the death rattle, relaxation of the jaw and opening of the mouth, and the evacuation of the bowels. Souls were said to leave the body with death at a spectrum of times, from before death to much later to never. Most frequently mentioned was immediately after death, found in all 3 regions. Half as frequent, and limited almost fully to the northeast and southeast, was the idea that a soul stays in the body or near the grave for a time after death. The idea that one soul stays with the body while a second soul leaves was restricted to largely the northeast. A few tribes mention a soul leaving before death, again mainly in the northeast. In conclusion, it is possible to scientifically evaluate the credibility of an archaeological reconstruction of the soul concepts of a past woodland or plains people using systematized knowledge about woodland and plains Indians' notions of souls, including the relative frequencies and tribal distributions of particular soul characteristics. In our Ohio Hopewell interpretation of this burial layout depicting a soul leaving the head of an individual, we could ask: did tribes of the Northeast think that a soul resides in the head, exits from the head, is the only soul that departs from the body at death, departs not long after death, resembles the deceased and has a human bodily form, and is material, visible, and have weight? The answer to all these questions is yes for Northeastern tribes, strongly supporting the interpretation. One would then test the interpretation further with archaeological contextual evidence. We hope our survey, once published, will help move the documentation of woodland prehistoric religions toward greater rigor, and perhaps reduce some malaise about their study. Thank you for listening. May your day be a good one.